Welcome back to Mighty Ride Junkies as we start our journey taking a look at Knott's Berry Farm. If you just got here, you may be wondering, aren't I missing some videos? Well, I mentioned in the previous video that before we got to the rides or even the brief history video, we were going to take a look at Knott's Scary Farm first, which is the annual Halloween event at Knott's Berry Farm, mainly because it's just that time of the year. So we're going to begin all the way in 1972. The Knott family was looking for some sort of event or attraction that would attract guests into the park during the slower operating months. When the idea of a Halloween event was proposed, it was shot down by the Knott family children. At this time, Walter Knott was letting his kids take the reins, and he was only spoken to for final approval. However, in September 1973, when the idea was presented as a Halloween party, Walter got wind of it before his children and quickly approved the project. In less than 6 weeks, the park had to be up and ready for the very first Knott's Halloween Haunt. What sold Walter Knott was having TV host horror icon Sinister Seymour be the main attraction for the event, with a guided maze and Halloween-themed changes to rides as more of a supporting role. To much of the surprise of cast members, more guests showed up than ever before for the month of October. For just $4, guests could enter the park for 5 extra hours of Halloween fun. During the first season, guests would have the Monster Maze, a guided attraction where guests would follow their guide as scenes around them played out. The Calico Mine Train received a retheme as the Ghostway Express, and the Timber Mountain Log Ride was rethemed into Satan's Sawmill. The ride was redressed with Halloween decorations, while scare talent attempted to scare you on the rides. However, Halloween Haunt was isolated to only the Ghost Town area. But all of that wouldn't last very long, because by 1974, the event was already a huge success. 1974 had a surprise for everyone. Sinister Seymour wanted to continue hosting shows at Halloween Haunt. However, the actor who played Seymour, Larry Vincent, was fighting a losing battle with cancer. Vincent was so determined to play at Halloween Horror Nights that the 3 days he performed there were pretty rough. He would check into a hospital, check out for Halloween Haunt, and then check back in once he completed his final show of the night. Calico Mine Train and the Timber Mountain Log Ride received the same setup as last year, only receiving new names. The Mine Train was now named Calico's Phantom Mine Train, and the Log Ride was changed to the Devil's Log Ride. But the event was a hit. The park sold out all 3 nights, and for the first time in Knott's Berry Farm history, they had to turn people away from the gate. To help battle wait times, a last-minute attraction was added. The Stagecoach Ride was changed to the Stagecoach Ride through Wolfman Country. The same trail was used as during the day operations, but scare actors were added throughout the trail. The Monster Maze was renamed to the Haunted Shack, and this time guests were free to walk on their own and were not guided through. But by the end of the season, there were already talks about expanding the event throughout the park, as well as having more nights. Unfortunately, before the 1975 season could hit, Larry Vincent sadly passed away in March of that year. With Sinister Seymour gone from the lineup, Knott's Berry Farm made some big changes for the 1975 event. First, they expanded the scare zone so it was no longer isolated to just Ghost Town. There was now a total of 5 rides rethemed for Halloween, and the single maze in the park began to take a darker turn to the mazes that we know today. The change was so drastic compared to the previous 2 years that the event was renamed to Knott's Scary Farm. While Halloween Haunt is an alternative title still used today, Knott's Scary Farm would become its main title from here on out. The Calico Mine Train and the Timber Mountain Log Ride were given much simpler names that would stick with the attractions for a while. The Mine Train was now called the Haunted Mine, while the Log Ride was called Terror Mountain. The now defunct ride, Knott's Berry Tales, was rethemed into Knott's Scary Tales. The lights within the ride were dimmed down, and costumes were placed over those lovable characters within the ride. With the added dark, creepy music, the ride proved to be a contender with its counterparts. The Stagecoach Trail was rethemed into Trail of the Headless Horseman, where guests on the ride were told the story of the Headless Horseman before encountering him towards the end of the trail. And while the Headless Horseman Trail isn't something we see today, you can still find the Headless Horseman with his skeleton horse roaming the park in the event today. The Calico Railroad was rethemed into the Transylvania Railroad, and the single maze within the park didn't change its location but changed its name to Trail of the Tortured. The stage areas within the maze didn't really change, but rather saw upgrades from the previous year. But the year gave birth to my all-time favorite Halloween show, The Hanging, which we will get more into depth about later on if you aren't familiar with it. If you are familiar with it, it wasn't anywhere near to the scope that it is today. During the 1975 season, The Hanging was essentially a street show, where at undisclosed times, Calico's finest would drag a bank robber, horse thief, or a murderer and hang them. Now with solid momentum, Knott's Scary Farm would do a lot of rinse and repeat and would barely see any changes. In 1976, only two things were really changed. One, Gasoline Alley, a motorized car ride, had the surrounding area around the track decorated in the good old Halloween feels. It was now the Gasoline Alley through Sleepy Hollow. The second thing, The Hanging moved to an actual stage. In an attempt to make the hanging of the convict more real, special effects were starting to be used. In order for this to happen, the street show was moved to a stage where it now had slotted times to see the public execution. 1977 would later become a staple year for Knott's Scary Farm history, but before we get into the important stuff, let's take care of the unimportant stuff, which was bumper cars being turned into Bump-A-Ghoul, which was exactly the same thing. The only difference was there was Halloween music playing during the motion of the ride. Alright, now on to the important stuff. The Hanging had changed into a more narrative show with build-up to the final moments. The show would follow the Calico townspeople searching for a witch. They would accuse a woman by the name of Sarah Marshall. For the remainder of the show, you, the audience, begin to believe Marshall is innocent. However, as the noose is tightened around her neck, she turns into the witch and begins cursing you and the townspeople. While the witch has been a part of Scary Farm since the first season, this is where the witch would become an icon within the Scary Farm community. But the main hit of the season was the standalone maze, 10 Chilling Chambers, a maze that took you through 10 sections of the biggest and most popular phobias known. And for the first time in history of the event, the maze was a complete standalone, constructed just for the event. It wasn't attached or used anything from the park that was there year-round. And it was moderately successful, enough so that maze ideas were starting to flood in from the creative teams. Which brings us to the 1978 season, which introduced a second maze, the Trail of Terror. A very simple maze that had guests walking through black hallways with strobe lights leading them into rooms where different gruesome scenes would play out. Of course, we all have to start somewhere. In 1979, the Trail of Terror was renamed to Black Bart's Trail of Terror. Black Bart was a real outlaw during the Wild West era. He was a known robber who would target Wells Fargo assets. The Trail of Terror was slightly rethemed to give it more of a Wild West feel. The 10 Chilling Chambers was renamed into the Chilling Chambers of Horror, where the maze was focusing on more than just phobias now. The Hanging had been renamed to the Midnight Witch Hanging. Every night at midnight, guests would gather around and watch the trial and hanging of Sarah Marshall. As before, she wouldn't turn into a witch until the noose was around her neck. However, instead of hanging her till death, a new twist was added to the show. Right before Marshall drops, she would vanish into a thick fog. Guests would hear the witch laughing in the distance after cursing them all. The change was made to give guests the creepy feeling the witch would come get them. To add to the effect, after midnight, the Green Witch would stalk the streets with her ghoulish friends. This theme would stay with The Hanging for 9 seasons. The conclusion of the 1980s would be very significant for Knott's Berry Farm, as by that time frame, Knott's Scary Farm wasn't just a Southern California Halloween event. But more on that in the next video. And thank you for watching. Hopefully part 2 will come out sometime very soon. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, take care and be safe.